All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here, or thanks for tuning in remotely. It is May 22nd, 2023. It's a meeting of the Princeton Mayor and Council. And Madam Clerk, could we have the meeting statement, please?
Yes, Mayor. Adequate notice of this meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act, including the time, date, and location of the meeting. In addition, the agenda and all related materials were posted electronically and made available to the public on Princeton's meeting portal in advance of the meeting.
Thank you.
We gather today on the land of Lenni Lenape. As members of the Princeton community, we aspire to show appreciation, respect, and concern for all peoples and our environment. We honor the Lenape and other indigenous caretakers of these lands and waters, the elders who lived here before, the indigenous today, and generations to come.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Ms. Perron-Lambros?
Here.
Ms. Niedergang?
Here.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Sachs?
Here.
Ms. Fraga is absent. Mr. Newland?
Here.
Mayor Frida.
Here. If you'd like, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Any council announcements or reports? All right, very good. Bernie, anything from? No, Mayor. Thank you very much. All right, before we get to the presentation tonight, we have public comments for items not on the agenda. So if anyone in the audience has a comment for an item that's not on the agenda, now would be the time to jump up and say that. No pressure to do so, but just asking. Okay, and I don't see any hands up for anyone on Zoom, so we'll move right into our presentation, and who's leading us off?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this evening's meeting is to hold a work session to discuss the current and future wireless communication services in Princeton. We have representatives here this evening from Crown Castle. Crown Castle is a third-party provider with facilities throughout Princeton that carry the services for Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and it may be unbeknownst to me, I don't know if there are any other service providers that they actually provide facilities for. Representing Crown Castle this evening are Michelle Lenig, Jacqueline Jones, Carver Chu, Jason Mayo, and Joseph Clem. As I said, Crown Castle owns the facilities throughout Princeton on which antennas exist for the major service providers. Also this evening, we will hear from Verizon Wireless. Jennifer P. Young with the State Government Affairs is accompanied by Achille Balisaro and Herb, whose last name I didn't catch. But this evening we'll start with Crown Castle. They have a presentation on preparing our community for the future. And if someone from Crown would like to come up. Thank you. Can I have table 2? Oh. Thank you, Dolores.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Purcell, staff. Appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. My name is Carver Chu, External Affairs Director for Crown Castle, and wanted to take just a few minutes to walk through a few slides and just tell you a little bit more about Crown Castle and our infrastructure and our presence here in the city. We often talk about Crown Castle being one of the largest companies you've never heard about. And the reality is, I think most people probably haven't. But the reality is that we're the nation's largest shared communications infrastructure company. We have a robust portfolio of communications assets nationally, including 40,000 towers, approximately 115,000 small cells, on all of that underpinned by 85,000 route miles of fiber with enterprise customers through all of the major markets. Go to the next slide. As a society, it's clear that we're becoming just more and more interconnected and more dependent upon wireless networks. If you just take a look around, you can't go in a restaurant, you can't go into the pickup line at school, the airport, movie theater, without seeing people on their phones and other digital devices, laptops. And I think if you look back at the pandemic, the one thing that proved out is just the need for connectivity and broadband access. And I think whether you're talking about remote learning, remote work, telehealth, the ability to bank, entertain, you need to be connected. And historically, connectivity has been thought about something that is around the individual consumer, right? You're on your phone, you're accessing different things. I think now we're moving into a new point with 5G, next-gen technologies, where we're moving beyond the consumer, and we're talking about connecting whole communities. I mean, you're talking tonight about connecting the community here in Princeton. So it's more than just individuals being connected. It's people to people, it's devices to devices, it's machines to machines, and the Internet of Things that we're hearing more and more about. Crown Castle will continue to play a very important role by providing the infrastructure that will help provide or enable those services that I just described. In terms of our presence across the state of New Jersey, just a quick slide to show you, we've got almost 700 traditional macro towers and rooftops, over 1,000 small cells, and over 6,000 route miles of fiber. Our wireless networks cover about 2/3 of the state. And then from an enterprise standpoint, our fiber connects 2,200 buildings, and we've got customers in government, medical, tech, all public safety, all of those spaces. In Princeton, I'll get to this slide in a minute, but in Princeton, we've got 75 small cells, about 100 miles of fiber, and we are providing fiber to several large institutions, including Princeton University, Penn Medicine, Princeton Radiology, and other enterprise and professional customers. But I wanted to make sure you had an idea of what we were doing here within the town of Princeton. So what's driving this demand and this continued investment in communications infrastructure? It's what you see here on this screen. It's really simply put data consumption. Whether you're talking about internet surfing, streaming, video, social media, all of the applications that we have on our phones, and of course 5G, next generation technology, it is consuming tremendous amounts of data, and we're trying to find ways to accommodate that demand. This slide shows over a 4-fold increase over a 6-year period. It's really exponential growth. And I think the important thing here is not just the numbers, but how we're going to go about solving and accommodating that growth. It's going to be through fiber and small cells to help provide the speed, the capacity that you're going to need to keep pace with that growing demand. I mentioned 5G. This is just a slide because it's easy to talk about 5G and next generation technologies in terms of the consumer because it's advertised that way. I think for you as decision makers, as stewards of the city, I think that you want to be looking beyond the individual and looking at what 5G and next generation technologies can do for the city in terms of a smart city, utilizing sensors and other things to manage traffic, to reduce energy consumption, to improve public safety, parking. There's a lot of applications. We won't go into it tonight, but just a reminder that 5G can be important not just to the consumer, but also to individuals like you who are managing the city and looking at how to accommodate the future needs of this city through technology. And the benefits of connectivity. Economic, we can go to the next slide. I'm sorry, we can go one more, please. Obviously, economic growth. CTIA had a study that showed about $1.9 billion in GDP growth and 5,500 jobs tied to more connectivity, 5G. When we talk about the digital divide, digital equity, My understanding is that about 37% of Americans use their smartphone to access the internet, even if they have a landline at home or a subscription. So you can't underestimate the importance of wireless networks to providing access for individuals. And I think those studies show that when it comes to certain demographics, they really rely on cell phones and wireless connections to be able to access broadband. Healthcare, we talked about telehealth, the importance of wireless for that. And I think public safety can't be underestimated. 8 out of 10 911 calls come from a mobile device, so it's critical as you look at public safety across the city to remember the important role that wireless plays. Lastly, I think I'll just close with this. It's just a reminder that we're uniquely situated to assist you in the continued expansion and improvement of your communications infrastructure. Crown Castle has a shared communication infrastructure model. We have the ability to leverage new and existing fiber vertical assets to obviously accommodate small cells and provide you with a solution, or at least another option to traditional single-tenant solutions. So we look forward to the discussion tonight. Happy to answer questions, but that should just give you just a little overview of Crown Castle, our role in the space, and I'll stop dropping pens. Thank you very much.
I don't know if anybody had any questions or comments yet, or? Yeah. Yep. Jim, are we doing Verizon up next, or what was on your agenda here?
All right. Jennifer Young is speaking on behalf of Verizon.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of the public. My name is Jennifer Young. I am the Director of Government Affairs for Verizon. I'm based in Southern New Jersey and career employee, so I'm really excited to be here this evening to talk to you a little bit about the company. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. All the information that I'm sharing is publicly available, so if you have any questions, you can feel free to go to one of our websites. That information is included here. If you have any additional questions or follow-up, it is available to the public. This map shows that we have great coverage in Princeton, and I know that there are some areas that we want to continue to deepen our coverage, but we do have both 4G LTE, 5G, and ultra wideband available in portions of Princeton. We have developed a website called Improve Your Wireless. It is a repository to allow the public to get more information on, specifically on small cells and on wireless infrastructure. Very simple, improveyourwireless.com/Princeton. We do update it. We actually have a video that's going to be updated. They'll be loaded back onto the website. If anybody has gone on there recently, you may have seen that there was a link that was broken. We've taken it down, and we will have a new video there. But it gives you little information on small cells actually in place. Not necessarily just the diagrams or somewhere out of a textbook, but in real scenarios. You can see them in public spaces, not necessarily here in Princeton, but maybe somewhere else in New Jersey. So you can just see it as a streetscape. You'll see what they look like, and there's various forms of them. We also have areas on the website where the public can provide us feedback. If you have questions, if you want someone to respond, we got an email a couple of weeks ago from a member of the public, and I know that we were able to engage that individual right away, responded to them, and we have a team that's working with them to address the question that they had. We do have a whole suite of services that are available here in Princeton to meet the needs of both consumer, business, and government services. FiOS is just one of them, but of course we have a whole suite of services, especially for business customers, to address their many service needs, whether they're small, medium, or large enterprise business. And our FiOS services are very diverse in terms of their offerings. They start at $25. We are participating in the Affordable Connectivity Program. That is one of the byproducts of some of the COVID activity that happened in 2020. The newest version out of the FCC, $25 a month for customers who have any type of public assistance or who have income restrictions. They're able to get essentially free services available with FiOS, and that provides them broadband to home. So that's one of the ways that we are addressing digital divide in communities across the country. Additional information is available at our website, theverizon.com, the Improve Your Wireless website. And if people have specific questions about 5G, there is a whole section on Verizon's website about 5G that talks about both the technology, use cases, and some history. A little background on Verizon. Of course, our operations center is here in New Jersey. We have approximately 3,500 employees that are based in that one building in Basking Ridge. Corporate-wide, we have about 14,000 employees that are here in New Jersey. They call the state home. And we cover about 535 communities here across the state. So we have a broad range of employees, retirees, and people who call New Jersey home. Wanted to be here tonight. I'm glad for the opportunity and looking forward to the comments and the feedback from the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would just point out AT&T was invited to attend the meeting but declined to join us this evening. So why don't we open this up to the public? And
I think you should repeat that just to make sure everyone hears.
I'm sorry?
You might want to just repeat that.
Repeat what I just said?
Yes.
Let me just say this again. AT&T was invited but declined to participate tonight. And after that, I said, hey, up next is the public. So anyone that wants to speak, you're going to come up to the microphone and say your name and start talking. You just come on up, and there'll be a timer that comes up. You have 3 minutes. So I really don't like to be rude and interrupt people, but watch the timer. So as you start getting down to that last 10 seconds, figure out how to wrap up. And we'll try to give everybody a chance to speak tonight.
Hi, Peter Madison, 645 Snowden Lane. I've lived here for 42 years. This coverage map is great, but it doesn't exist. Where I live on 645 Snowden Lane, the coverage is horrendous. I was with Verizon for a number of years, paying $130 a month. So I switched over to Consumer Cellular, which also has horrendous coverage with using a different carrier. But at least I only pay $60 a month now for horrendous coverage. And I'm not the only one who does this. My neighbors and people on Herrontown Road tell me they have the same problem, that sometimes if they walk outside their house and stand in the street, they'll get a message or they'll get a signal, but otherwise they don't get it. I've had another person tell me they were driving through downtown Princeton, and because the towers are all small on the buildings, they lost their signal. And my understanding is there are other parts of Princeton that have this problem. When I was on the planning board for 13 years, whenever a person came before us with a cell tower application, it was as if they were suggesting that they build a prison, because nobody wanted a cell tower. God help us that we're going to have an ugly cell tower that we have to see. So there was a cell tower built on Route 206. That was approved because it was in an industrial area. But that sits below the Princeton Ridge, so I don't get that signal. I get no signal. And Princeton is a town where we have a lot of dependence on cell phones. We have people working from their homes with home-based businesses. We have a lot of consultants. We have writers, people who do research from their homes. And if you can't get a cell service, you might as well move somewhere else, because why be in Princeton if you can't conduct your business and do research? So I don't blame the cell phone companies. I don't really need 5G. I need 4G. What I blame are you and the planning board and the zoning, because they are holding back and restricting cell phone towers from being built. That's what we need. Cell phone towers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Van Williams, 37 Governor's Lane. I don't know that everybody understands what small cells mean. 5G works best when it's in multiple locations, closer locations than standalone large towers, and there have to be more of them, and they have to be spaced such that they can provide coverage. That's the good news. The bad news is you got a lot of companies who are vying, or will be vying, for getting your attention, or mine, or anybody else here. And the question is, how will they, or you, divvy up the town so that they know where they can place their towers and lay the fibers that will connect those towers so that we can all enjoy the benefits of 5G. I have the same complaints that many others have. If I'm in the basement of my house at 37 Governor's Lane, I don't get cell phone reception. I got to go all the way up onto the second floor. And that's just absurd in today's world. So I know you have a challenge ahead of you, and I hope you will take it up with some enthusiasm and hold these characters to account, because what they've promised and when they will deliver are two entirely different things.
Thank you.
While Bernie is making his way up, I just want to briefly respond to Ed. I think years ago, it's true that the municipality was obstructing placement of towers. Just a few years ago, federal legislation was passed, which actually gives us very little control and a tight time frame to respond when we get applications. So you can blame the cell companies now.
Okay, please.
I'm Bernie Miller. I live at 34 Governor's Lane. I've lived there since 2007. Prior to that, I lived elsewhere in Princeton. I want to thank Council for providing the public with an opportunity to comment on a problem that has been vexing at least me for the last 10 or 15 years. I do not write a check to Crown Castle. I see them pulling cable throughout the town. I write a check each month to either Verizon or Comcast Infinity. At one time, I had Verizon provide my internet and telephone services, and it collapsed in a cloud of dust. The service was intermittent at best. I now have Comcast Xfinity service. In order to place a call on my cell phone, I have to step out of my house onto the patio outside, and unless I do that, the call stands at least a 90% probability of failing. I'm disappointed in the fact that Verizon has seen fit to send their government services representative here when they should be sending their consumer services representative to hear the sad tale of the kind of service that they provide, at least to my part of the community. I'm also disappointed in the fact that the other provider in Princeton, Comcast Xfinity, is not here to hear the story. I'm 94 years old. I rely on my internet service and telephone service for safety and for health. I rely on it as a lifeline in the event that I have a problem in my house and I need to get help. When it's intermittent and unreliable, I stand a good chance of not getting the help that I call for. I'm paying for service that I do not get. And the cable companies damn well ought to get their act together and provide the service that we pay them for. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Bernie.
Hi, Lorna O'Sullivan, 300 Bunn Drive. I've been at Copperwood now for 7 years. The cell service, forget it. I mean, it's a moot point. I just made 2 calls today, and they both dropped. And I was calling Montgomery. I mean, not far. It's very frustrating. Or I call people and they hear things on the phone. They say something's wrong with your phone. And there's nothing wrong with my phone. But my main concern is living in Copperwood. They have a lovely basement with all kinds of fuzzy things on it that's supposed to be fireproofing. All it does is make dust on your car. But you also have no cell phone service in the basement. So, lo and behold, you come down to go to your car and you find somebody lying on the floor. You've got a cell phone, but it doesn't work. So, it's a large basement. I mean, it's the size of a city block. So there are 2 open doors at each end. So you have to run, go outside, and then what happens when your cell phone doesn't work? This is a matter of life and death. I started petitions to get an emergency phone in that damn basement because, I mean, this happened, and I just happened to be a nurse and have very little knowledge, but enough knowledge that it changed from CPR first to call first, then CPR. But if your phone doesn't work, the aggravation from making personal calls seems light in light of watching somebody possibly having a heart attack. And then what does Verizon say? Oh, I'm sorry. You know, and I don't know about other places, but I had no choice for TV or phone service. It was Verizon or nothing. So that's like being in a communist country or a communist part of Princeton, where you have no choice. You can't say, well, I don't like you, Verizon, I'll go to Comcast, because Comcast can't come there, or whatever other services are now available. But the most serious thing is no telephone service in the basement, and by the time you get outside, you're not guaranteed you're going to have telephone service either. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to pause for just a second. We have a little technical difficulty in the back room where we're broadcasting this. We have to change something. I think, anyway, I'm not going to get into it, but we just need about a minute or 2. Sorry for the interruption. And we're going to correct our technical difficulty. Some people want it. Okay, we're back. We're back. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, we as the governing body, are acutely aware of this situation and that it is life and death. You don't have to convince us. The reason why we invited our providers, and it's unfortunate that not all of them had the courage to attend, but we're pleased that the ones who did attend. And we have been conveying this for a number of years, and what we hear is denial and downplaying of what the situation is. And so it is our hope tonight to document the concerns of our residents, and then I think our engineers and together with the representatives will hopefully come up with some suggestions, and I think our next speaker may hopefully speak to some of the really crucial safety issues that the lack of coverage imposes on our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm not a resident of Princeton, but I am the superintendent of the public schools here. I am here this evening to represent our 3,800 students, over 700 staff members in our 6 buildings. We have had issues with the cell coverage in all of our buildings, and it truly might be an issue of life and death. I believe that earlier this evening, one of our principals sent a note through our board president stating that at her school at JP, which is on the north side of town, in no area of her building can they count on cell service. So in the case where, Lord forbid, there is something where individuals cannot get to their telephones, their landlines, we have been training our staff to use their cell phone. But in the cases where a school like JP or PMS or PHS cannot use their cell phones, then it really would potentially be a very unfortunate situation. I know that we have a very positive relationship with Town Council. I thank you for all of your support, in particular how the police department often does our security safety drills, and even they have recognized when they're on our campuses that they don't have access to cellular service. So we are potentially having to look at what technology can we as a school district put into our schools, because safety is a huge concern for our staff members, and we want all of our staff members and our students to know that safety is the #1 priority for our school district. But it would be very unfortunate if we had to use school budget dollars for a service that hopefully through meetings like this can come up with some type of solution for our schools. But please know that we really appreciate you having this conversation. We appreciate those vendors who are here this evening, and we thank you for this opportunity to share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you.
Hi, Lauren Bender, 19 Madison Street. I too want to thank the council and Jim Purcells for having this meeting and bringing it to my attention. Everyone stressed the really important things. I would just like to add to the conversation that I live on Madison Street, right in town. I work at Chambers and Bank, right in town. I walk through Palmer Square, right in town. And I want to make sure it's clear that downtown has no reception. I use Verizon. I often have 4 bars, and I cannot maintain a conversation walking through Palmer Square. So just as you're looking to solve the problem, it's not just people who live outside of the central business district. It's those of us who live and work in the central business district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, Council. My name is Jeff Bergman. I live at 300 Dodds Lane. I'm going to reiterate what many have already said. The service is, I'm talking about Verizon now. The service is terrible. The drop calls are excessive. It happens all over town. It happens at my house. The map is a fiction. It's a complete and utter fiction. I want to talk about what you do when you have bad service. You call the company, and the company's customer service is abysmal. I have been on the phone with them for hours and hours, and then there's a time when they say, let me put you on pause, or a hold, or we'll call you back, or put your number in, and we'll set an appointment time. They never get back to you. They never come back, they never get back to you, and you wasted hours and hours and hours, and it's maddening. Furthermore, the plans are impossible to compare. You can't figure out what you're buying. And I have, I think, 6 lines now on my cellular plan. But, if I wanted to change to a different service, there are a million people that will sell it to you. But if you want to change, you can't find somebody. It's like everybody in the company's gone out to lunch. And this is a necessary service. It's something that we need. So, something has to be done. I think that they need to put more towers, more, at least in our neighborhood, the Littlebrook area has terrible, terrible service. And, it just galls me that Crown Castle comes and says, we're the biggest company you've never heard of, and we have 40,000 towers. And our calls get dropped right and left. I mean, that's just galling. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hello, I'm Melanie Stein. I live at Prospect Avenue on the same side of the street as the Riverside School towards Kingston. My driveway is kind of a dead zone. So if I am having a business call, which I often are in the house, and I need to go outside because I need to get something or drive somewhere, the call is interrupted. And it's interrupted until almost the Riverside playground. I started with AT&T service. When I couldn't get service in my house, I switched to Verizon. My neighbors had Verizon and they switched. We all have the same problem, and I understand now that on Riverside East, there is also a total dead zone by TRI. I'm not quite sure why. I think we all know that if you're on a call and you're driving down Hamilton, it drops. I mean, there are well-known designated places. This has been going on for years. I've called the companies. The companies actually have told me on several occasions, not in the last 2 years, I haven't called them, but I think I registered on the Click Fix system. At that time when I did register, I called the phone company and they told me I should speak to the town council and the planning board because you guys refused to put up cell towers. I guess somebody from the town wrote me and said that wasn't true and that the problem is with the cell phone companies. I don't really know. I just know that I'm a 16-year resident. I've had the same dead zones in the same places, and I think the problem has been getting worse and not better. So whatever we can do, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Jacknow from Ferran Road. I actually wasn't going to talk, but since you said it's a working session and you want everyone's stories, I figured I should add mine. It's actually a little kind of the opposite of the first speaker, where I've lived here for 13 years and my cell service used to be pretty good. I knew the few spots in town where it would drop out or it would drop completely. If I was driving north on 27 to Kingston, it was going to drop right there. If I was at Library and Hodge, it was going to, drop out right there. But otherwise, I kind of knew, okay, hold on, I'm going to lose you, I'll call you right back, and all was fine. In the past month, it has gotten so much worse. I seriously thought I was going to lose my mind last week. I drove from the governor's mansion to Princeton Shopping Center, and my call dropped 3 times. And you just can't have a conversation. You can't get anything accomplished. In my house, and I live near the Hun School, all of a sudden I just have no service. I've had service for 13 years, and all of a sudden, the past few weeks, many times I just have no service. I got a text from my son, can you come pick me up from school? I pick him up at the same place all the time. I drove to school. I'm sitting there. I don't see him. I tried to text him or call him. I had no service. His friend walked by. Did you see I haven't seen him, no. Okay, I don't know where my son is. I moved my car up like 2 feet at a time till I finally got a bar and called him, and he was at a different building. He had texted me, but the text didn't come through till I got back home. And that, you can't, that's, another situation of it being dangerous. Your kids expect you, they need you need to be able to find them. And I don't know what's happened in the past month. I remember last year a bunch of cell things were added in town, and I feel like ever since then it's actually gotten worse. So you can document that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dan Rappaport, 300 Bun Drive. Thank you for giving us the chance to express our views about this problem. I'd like to mostly echo what Lorna said, but before I do that, I want to talk about what it was like when I was living for years in Holly House. The coverage over there was non-existent. I couldn't reach anyone, get a signal anywhere, any place indoors in Holly House. So there'd be a number of times when I'd have to go out of doors in the dark or in the rain to make a phone call before I could get through to someone. So I wish the people who are moving into the new building next to Holly House a lot of luck with getting their cell phone coverage adequately. And then for Copperwood, I find most of the time, but not all the time, I can make a phone call from my apartment. Sometimes I won't get through on the first dial, but I'll get through on the second dial. I think that happened 3 times today, but Lorna was absolutely right. You can't get any coverage in the garage, and if you pull your car out of the garage and are parked next to the main entrance, you can't get coverage from there either. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, you can talk to my third eye ear, but you could probably hear me anyway. Shari Ruskin on Westerly Road. I'm trying to say this without expletives. Service is absolutely execrable. I cannot make a phone call anywhere in my entire neighborhood in the western section. From a few blocks away, if I had a phone call in the car, I would say, wait, I'm going to lose you. Give me 10 minutes. I'll call you from my house phone. I should not have to use a house phone to make a phone call. Now, I don't have children, but I have children, but they're not children. But I have grandchildren, and my daughter works rather late at night, and so does my son-in-law. If the babysitter needs something, I'm it. And if I'm out walking the dog, I'm absolutely unreachable. Now, I pay an awful lot of money for service which I am absolutely not getting. And I'm not speaking just for myself, obviously, even though I'm a late arrival. No one in my entire neighborhood has service. We pay for a service that is non-existent. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Seema Bettigiri, 478 Riverside Drive. I wanted to share information. I don't know if T-Mobile was invited, but I have, and between the few members of our household, we have Verizon, T-Mobile, and one other cell company, and none of them seem to work. So when I had called T-Mobile, they did mention to me that they provide some sort of a small cell tower, but that's obviously only in the house. And they also asked us to switch to Wi-Fi calling, which we did and which works. But as soon as you leave the Wi-Fi zone, obviously, if picking up kids or even walking around the neighborhood, you get no service. And this is I think some sections where maybe off Riverside East, and then some sections of Prospect. And I'm wondering, as a temporary solution, and I was talking to the T-Mobile representative, and he seems to suggest that you need these little cell towers, which they are available on retail, and they offer to send me one if the Wi-Fi calling doesn't work. So I'm wondering if there's even a way to have these little towers installed as a temporary solution until the bigger problem gets fixed. So I just wanted to share this information. And just out of curiosity, was T-Mobile invited?
I honestly don't have a connection with T-Mobile because T-Mobile doesn't typically have their own network. They are carried on facilities that Crown Castle has.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So one thing I'd like us to do, Jim, maybe you could give us a very brief overview of the efforts that your world has been making for the last year and a half, 2 years with Crown Castle and Verizon to try to improve the Verizon network in town, and just give us a little bit of an update on what's going on there, and then either Verizon or Crown Castle, to whatever degree they want to comment on that, could feel free to jump up and talk after Jim just gives us a little overview.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, a few years ago, Verizon approached us and discussed with us how they wanted to bring 5G broadband to Princeton. Oh, you're showing that screen. I guess now that that screen's up, I'll explain what that is. Our police cars have Verizon wireless modems in them. And as they're driving around town, they gather the data of the signal strengths throughout town. The map that you're seeing on the screen is a map of the signal strengths during the last week, May 15th through May 22nd. And some of you will, if you know a good map of town, the places that you just mentioned are those red boxes. Riverside and Prospect, right over here. The western section is over here. There's some weak fair coverage, but I was listening. Let's see, Holly House is right up here. Snowden, Herrontown, all in this area. So what I didn't mean to have my PowerPoint presentation up, but this is what you saw from Verizon. This is what AT&T says they have. I'm jumping backwards a little bit. What was just discussed is what's known as a femto device, which is a Pico cell in your home that will boost the signal within your house to connect to the small cells. But back to the story is that Verizon and AT&T and the other providers are moving to the 5th generation. And as Crown Castle explained, that's important because we're all using our cell phones. I mean, we've already gotten to that point where we can't survive without them. So we have been discussing with Verizon where they want to put their 5G, and this is a map of the proposed 5G program that was presented to Council back in March of 2021. All of these yellow pins representing a new small cell node. Consequently, in discussions with Verizon, we noted to them that we have these poor areas of service, and Verizon came to us in December of this year and did a presentation and identified the weakest signals that they are able to detect, and those are the areas you see circled in red here. And they are working with Crown Castle and internally with themselves to enhance the 4G network, because I haven't upgraded my phone to a 5G yet. And I suspect many people in town have not purchased new 5G phones, and we're all still on a 4G network. And G stands for generation, not for gigabytes. So just so everybody knows. So we are working with the providers to try to expedite improved connections. But with 5G coming on so quickly, and that is the market, they're a business, so their business is driven by the market. They need to get these 5G installed, and there is a federal government FCC ruling that says that as soon as they notify us that they want to put in a small cell for 5G, we have 60 days to act on that application if it is on an existing facility, or 90 days if it's a new facility, as long as it's within municipal right-of-way. So that map with all the yellow pins are sites within the municipal right-of-way. We've already approved, oh, that's Crown Castle. Let's see, where's that approval? I cut that slide out. We have already approved a number of these locations, and Verizon is putting in these 5G, and they have been cooperating and understanding our problem with 4G. For instance, there's one that's approved at the corner of, I'm going to say Geo and Moore, or Geo and Jefferson. Actually, I do have that slide on here, don't I? It's the last slide. There we go. And near the high school, and that will include a new 4G antenna as well as 5G. So it'll be a dual antenna at that location. I think that's the one on Walnut on here. But these are the ones that we've already approved. We're waiting for the next batch, and I think that's about all I should probably be saying.
No, that's good, Jim. I appreciate it. I just want people to know that we are trying to work with both Verizon and Crown Castle, and we have attempted to work with AT&T to some degree also. But anyway, I don't know if either Verizon or Crown Castle want to jump up and just tell us, jump in with more info.
Again, Carver Chu with Crown Castle. I think what I would contribute to the conversation is, first off, just a clarification, because I think it's important to distinguish Crown Castle's role in this. We want to be a part of the solution. We are not a service provider. We're not a wireless service provider like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. We provide the infrastructure that facilitates or enables that service. So providers will often come to us. These are not inexpensive installations. It takes a lot of upfront capital. Carriers at times will invest that capital themselves, and other times they will work with a company like Crown Castle or other infrastructure companies to deploy, and they'll lease it from us. So our role in this is to provide the infrastructure to meet a need of a customer. It can be a carrier, it can be another, it could be a government entity or another customer, but just for clarification, we don't provide the service. So what you see with respect to Princeton and our installations, those are facilities that we've constructed, we own and operate, and we're leasing that to a customer. And I think as Jim has shared, T-Mobile has a lot of those. T-Mobile would provide the service, they're just doing it over our infrastructure. So we're happy to be a part of these conversations. I think there's a role for us to play in helping again, expand and improve the coverage here across the town. But again, it's done in partnership with the providers or those providing service. So I can't speak to what the providers are going to do or need to do. I can only speak to our role, which is to be a partner in that and to be an infrastructure, part of the infrastructure solution in meeting that need. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit.
I think that helps, but I also just like to ask you a question. Yeah. So as someone who provides the infrastructure, your capabilities for putting up a pole or whatever you want to call it in any one location could handle antennas from more than one provider.
Correct.
So I mention this because as we get into the world of 5G, the 5G antennas need to be spaced pretty darn frequently. It's not like you're going great distances in between them. So if we have AT&T, Verizon, and who knows who that wants to put 5G antennas in, and they all want to do it on their own, we are going to have an awful lot of infrastructure, poles or whatever, sticking up all over town. So I think it makes sense for us whenever we can to suggest to Verizon, thank you again for being here, and to AT&T, because I'm sure they'll watch this film, but anyway, to them that they should co-locate as often as possible, because aesthetically, it's crazy, and just resource-wise, it's even more crazy for everybody to be going out and putting all their own infrastructure in. It just makes no sense.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Obviously, I can't speak on behalf of Verizon or AT&T and how they would respond to that. They clearly have, I will say, they obviously have network needs that they're trying to address, right? And so they're going to do it in their own way. I certainly, on Crown Castle's behalf, won't be telling them how to do it, but we're happy to be a part of that solution and being a partner with them, with you and others.
Yep.
Can I ask? That was the question I wanted to ask, but I have a follow-on. So is there any way in your working with the various providers to get them to co-locate? I mean, it seems like the spots are the same for all of the cell phone. I mean, the dead zones are the same. So if you're putting new towers, I mean, it just seems logical that if they could co-locate, we could solve the problem, that you would solve the problem for all of these providers and for the residents.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I don't think that in direct response, I don't think I can force that. I guess what I would say, because I think maybe some additional clarification, it gets very technical, right? We see illustrations, and it's clear that there are some gaps, there are weak areas, and you can see the colors. But within that, there's a lot more that's going on from a technical, a performance, and operational standpoint for the providers. I would just say, in terms of an analogy, if you can imagine, you're moving into a new home, right? You're arranging your furniture in a living room or a family room. You're going to arrange your furniture in a different way than the people that were there before you, and different than the people coming in behind you, even though it's the same space. It's a kind of a crude analogy, but the reality is I think for the providers, they're covering these areas in their own way, right? Based on network performance, where the needs are, what the data is telling them, and it's not going to be exact provider to provider. So in terms of how they do that, it's up to them to answer that. All I can tell you is that we do provide the opportunity to co-locate and get multiple installations on our assets, but that's not always the solution. It can be, but it's not always the solution.
Fair enough. I mean, but I would think there's
Yeah.
some financial benefit to co-locating, and I was just curious, I mean, what about other towns? I mean, is that a model that's happening in other towns? I mean, this has got to be across the state, across the country problem.
I think you would find that it's going to always be a combination. You're going to find networks where there are installations that are co-located and installations that are single tenant. It's just the way the networks are built out. You're going to have a combination. It seems here, obviously, you're more challenged right now. You're not alone. There are other communities that have similar challenges, but I think that's about all I can say.
No, that's good. You don't have to answer, I mean, we don't expect you to solve every problem here, especially since you're just building infrastructure and you're not actually providing the service.
Yeah.
So we're gonna just to get a couple more questions, because I know Verizon's in the back of the room and they want to come up and speak too.
Don't go yet.
And
Wait,
thank you.
Don't go yet.
Sorry.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. And,
Absolutely.
And to Verizon as well. I'm sure it's hard to listen to people complain about you. We have some experience with that. So my question, I'm struggling to kind of, I guess, understand how you operate as what your model of operation is. So your job, Crown Castle's job, is not to, say, provide service to an area, to put up enough poles, enough towers to provide service to the area. Your job is to say, T-Mobile comes to you and says, we want 3 towers. Here's where they are. So do you understand what I'm saying? I'm just wondering, like, if your job as Crown Castle is to provide service in an area, then this is more on you, because obviously service is not being provided. If your job is to put up 3 towers, regardless of what effect they have, then that's a different matter. I'm trying to,
Yeah,
is that a clear question?
It's a good question. If I understand, if I can try to answer, hopefully I'm answering it. The way we interact with the providers, the wireless providers, the carriers, is that they typically are trying to address, much like you're seeing here, they're trying to address a deficiency in their network, or they're trying to improve performance in their network, right? They have a specific need across their network. If they decide that a company like Crown Castle can help address that need more cost effectively, they will work with us rather than investing the capital themselves up front. What we would do is sit down with them, look at what it is they're trying to accomplish, and look to see where maybe we have existing fiber, where we have existing small cells or towers. Are there other things that we can leverage? But the bottom line is we'd work with them to look at the polygon or the area that needs to be addressed and come up with a solution to solve that. And that may be tapping into or leveraging existing assets we may have, or maybe adding new installations where there aren't any. So it could be a combination thereof. But typically it's the provider that says, hey, Crown Castle, we have a need. We want to work with you to solve this and leverage your infrastructure. And obviously we would work on designing a solution. But that's typically how it works.
How do they measure if you've met the need? If the need is to provide cell service and there's not cell service, then clearly either they haven't given you enough money to meet the need, or you know, what's the next step then from your perspective? Like when you have conversations with them, do you say, you know, we can do what you want within this budget, but it's not going to achieve, you know, whatever the 80% coverage we think is key? What's your role there?
Obviously, we're contracting to provide a certain level of coverage or service contractually, right? They want coverage in this area. We agree it's going to be done via this means. We're going to use this fiber. We're going to place we're going to use these existing small cells. We're going to add new ones here. So we'll work with them to deliver against that agreement, that contractual arrangement. In terms of how it performs thereafter, again, that's still on the provider. If ultimately that's falling short, then from a performance standpoint, or operational standpoint, they would have to look at their network, presumably, and determine whether there are additional steps or measures they may need to take. But that, again, it's at that point, once the installations are constructed and on air, it becomes an operational or a performance matter for the provider.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Yeah.
Wasn't
And I'll
the
let them,
answer-
again, I'm
wasn't
not.
the answer I wanted, but thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they can provide more clarity. I'm obviously can't speak directly for them, so. Okay.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm kind of feeling the same way my colleague Eve Niedergang is feeling, so I kind of want to readdress her question. And let me read this. It says here, our role in your world is you own and operate the nation's most comprehensive portfolio of communications infrastructure. It all works together to meet unprecedented demand, connecting everything and everyone, erasing life's conventional boundaries. So you're the biggest business in infrastructure, right? And Verizon, you're the biggest business in service provider. Am I right on both of those counts? My question is, as people have said here in Princeton, like for me, in my home, I have a hard time getting the service. At Princeton Junction, you lose your Zoom calls. What we've heard is just a torrent of negative information about people dropping calls. We've heard it's a public safety issue. It is really, really bad here in Princeton. My question is, if your company is the biggest infrastructure provider and Verizon is the biggest service optics provider, who is going to be responsible for fixing the problem here in Princeton? Is it going to be Verizon? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be a combination of you? How long is it going to take? Because this is a problem that, you know, I'm hoping before the night's over, we can get some timetable for when all of this goes away, because it is really bad here in Princeton, and we need it fixed yesterday.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, when you break it down, it's a matter of, we'll call it service and coverage, right? So I think the question is posed to those that provide the service, right? Because that's what you're lacking. You're lacking service in some capacity, right? Either it's non-existent, or it's overwhelmed, or it's poor quality. You've got, sounds like, a range of issues related to the service that the wireless service that you are expecting here within Princeton. So it's up to those that provide service, and again, it's not just Verizon. AT&T, T-Mobile, Dish is the new provider. They're building out their networks right now. And providing their service. So you've got big four now, and you've got some regional ones. You don't have US Cellular here, but there are some regional providers as well. And you've got the cable companies who are moving into that space. So there are a range of companies that provide wireless service. So when it comes to meeting the wireless service needs, that's a question ultimately that has to get posed to those that provide that service. Like I said, we are in a unique position where we can help facilitate the infrastructure piece of that, right? So if it's going to help a provider to deploy more cost effectively using Crown, working with Crown, we can play that role. But again, we're not going to be able to solve it. We don't provide service. We can just be a part of that solution. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one of you this is for, but I'm still wondering, what is the problem? Is it, and I hope that the solution is not, initially it seemed like what I was hearing is that, well, everything will be fine when we have 5G, but it will be a long time before everybody has 5G. And in the meantime, you can see that the situation is very acute. And I know you mentioned that, there are other towns that, have similar challenges. I haven't experienced this challenge. I mean, I talk with people all over the world. The only place I have trouble connecting with them is in Princeton. I know immediately if I'm talking with someone in Princeton as opposed to another country, because we have a problem having the conversation. So is it the problem with your equipment? Is it not functioning? Is it that there's not enough of the equipment? In which case, is it Verizon that tells you that you need more of the equipment? And why hasn't it happened? Because, this is like, just since I've been on council, we've had 4 meetings in which we've expressed that we are in an acute situation, and so how do we know that I'm echoing Leighton, but how do we know we need action? And I think in order to solve a problem, there has to be acknowledgement that there is a problem, and what we have experienced heretofore is just denial. And, and that map, as everyone said, of the coverage it's a fantasy. We would love to have that coverage, but we don't. So how can we get that? How can you two work together? And most importantly, just to give an example of the superintendent who took time out of her evening to come here because the safety implications are so extreme. There is an entire school which is completely cut off. So the Johnson Park School, which is in the Rosedale area, how would the two of you work together, just by way of example, so that we could remedy that situation?
Yeah, again, I think it has to be initiated by those that are trying to provide the service that you're looking for, because we don't provide the service. What we would do is be happy to sit down, be part of the conversation with any number or all of the carriers. I think ultimately it's a question that has to get posed to those that ultimately deliver the service to your residents and your students. We can't mandate. I can't go to Verizon and say, hey, you need to go put a tower there. It doesn't work like that, right? Because again, I have no control over their capital spend. I certainly can't tell them where their network needs are, but they can. I think if you approach them right, I think the next step would be, it sounds like, building off of this, it sounds like you're going to need to have some additional conversations with all of us to understand how we might be able to help address some of these needs. I'm happy to be a part of those conversations, but I certainly can't go tell Verizon or AT&T, you need to go do X, Y, and Z.
So I'd like to ask my colleagues just for a little patience, because I think we really need to let Verizon come back up and speak. So I think thank you very much,
Thank you.
but we're moving the hot seat. Thank you, Jennifer.
Couple things. So Crown is just a part of the solution for Verizon. We have our own network. We build our own network. We have hundreds of miles of fiber, and we put our own facilities in. They're just a part of our solution. Small cells are just a part of the solution. We have macro sites. We have in-building solutions that we have in some areas, and we also have been responsive.
Could we just please pay attention? Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
I am. No problem, no problem. I was trying, because there's been so many people, I was trying to keep a little distance from the mic. But we have already met with the school. I mentioned in my comments earlier that there was a customer that reached out to us. It was that school. And we met with them. We've had calls, and we had an in-person meeting 2 weeks ago. I happened, if you saw us, we stepped outside just to make sure that, I think you said that was the superintendent knew that we had already. No problem. I was saying, thank you. I was saying that the customer that reached out to us via the website a few weeks ago, or actually it's been about a month, was the school. And we've had conversations with them, and we've already had a meeting, and we're talking about some solutions. So our goal is to continue to be responsive. We understand this is an issue in Princeton, and that we are looking for a number of ways to address it. Small cells are just a part of that answer. We have macros here in town. We are looking at a number of ways to address the issues, and as I said to the mayor before this meeting started, showing up is part of the answer, and so we want to hear. And so, I'm glad to get the feedback. That's why my colleagues and I are in the room to hear directly from you, to get some real-world stories on some of the concerns that you all have, so that we can take it back to our colleagues and talk specifically about some of the areas where you're having some issues, and see if we can come up with, again, a number of solutions to try and address the issues, both in terms of on the road and driving, but then some of the issues of, some of the apartment buildings where you're having issues in a basement and there's a safety issue. We want to be very mindful of that. And so our goal is to continue. We do a lot of work with Jim, and we'll continue to work with him on the variety of ways that we can work to address, both directly and with our partnership with Crown. Crown is a part of our solution, but we have a lot of our own facilities that we're placing here in town. And I did not provide any maps because they are proprietary. We don't put our facilities on maps and put them into the public space, because that those are our future plans and our future build plans, and that is not something that we normally have in the public space. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I may ask Jennifer a couple questions. Jennifer, 6 months ago, we did meet and we did talk about the proposals for enhancing the 4G network, and I wonder if you can give us an update on that. And I know we've talked a little bit about macro cells, if you could talk about where you might like to cite those to help us. I think the council would really like to hear a little bit more specificity, because and we know where we have to enhance the 4G network, and what is Verizon doing to make that happen more quickly.
Okay. So I know that our team is working on a group of projects about, there's basically two buckets, I will say. Some are further in the design phase than others. And we have some that are in approval, and until they have been fully approved, both internally and with the municipality, I can't specifically comment on where they're going. I know that we have one location in particular where there are some questions about the ownership of the property. And so because of that, we can't move forward with that particular project. But we have, there's a group of about 12 of us that meet every Wednesday to talk specifically about Princeton. And I handle a number of communities across the state. It's the only town that I have this type of a meeting for. So I will tell you that we're very engaged. We are very interested in coming to some solutions for the issues that have been raised. And we do want to make sure that, we continue to address the issues that you all have given to us. And I know that, I've had conversations with the mayor and some members of council directly, in addition to the calls that I've had with Jim. And so we will continue to work on permitting and getting these projects moved forward, both with our direct applications and then those that we're working with Crown that they are building on our behalf. So there is quite a bit of interest, and we are continuing to work to get at least some of these projects online this year.
Okay, I'm going to jump back up here. David?
Thanks. I have just a couple of pretty technical questions. One has to do with interoperability. Okay. So a lot of us do banking business at different banks, but we don't have to go to our bank to get cash from an ATM. Is there any interoperability between the equipment of different cell providers, or if I have Verizon service, can my calls only go through Verizon equipment?
So are you talking about your phone calls?
Yeah.
Like if you're making a call?
Yeah.
So, for the most part, that is on our network if you're a Verizon customer. But as you know, like if you talk about roaming, if you go out of whether it's out of the country or you go to a part of the country where Verizon doesn't have a network, we have relationships with other carriers where your call will continue to be completed through the interoffice network, and you won't have that call lost because you've left our network and then have to pick it up when you come back into a Verizon cell area.
So is that in any way a potential solution, in an area like Princeton where we have several different providers and your coverage is not complete? Can those arrangements be made with other service providers, or is it only something that you would do in an area that's a complete desert of Verizon equipment?
I'm not sure. I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks. The second direction is having to do with the relationship between 4G and 5G and backward compatibility, I guess you'd call it. All of us computer users know some programs, you have to have the latest version of the software and you can't save to an old version of the software. Other software is much more forgiving in that regard. And I'm curious whether, if you're installing 5G equipment, I'm guessing that that's not downward compatible and that a 4G phone just can't get a signal from a 5G location. And so, I'm thinking mostly about Lisa's problem where she had a failure of service about a month ago, and whether it's possible that she has a 4G phone and a 4G small cell that was located near her was replaced with a 5G small cell. And so if you could just talk about whether you are doing that at all, or do you leave all of your 4G equipment in place and roll out your 5G network as all new equipment rather than swapping out?
So what we will have is 4G, 4G LTE, we'll have 5G, and we'll have C-band. So there'll be a lot of different technologies that will be working at the same time. And they come from different places. So you'll have the large macro towers that have a variety of services on them. You have small cells that are closer to the user. Then you may have some equipment that is on top of buildings. So because you're getting technology from different pieces of our network, there is different services that are available. So that 4G user should not have an issue. They should be able to get service from one of those pieces of equipment that are in the area.
Could you answer the specific question? Say you have a piece of 4G equipment in a Crown Castle location, where you're leasing space. Is that something that you would ever do? Would be you need a location for a new piece of 5G equipment? Would you take out that 4G piece of equipment that's in that Crown Castle location because they don't have room for you to add 5G? Are you doing any of that kind of replacement as opposed to purely expansion of the capacity?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't want to make an assumption. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for
being
being honest.
I can get that answer for you.
Great.
Thank you, Jennifer, for being here. Thanks to my colleagues and to the public for their questions and challenges. So I have a few issues that I want to bring up. I feel like you're being pretty vague here. I would love to see some goals and Verizon commit to setting certain goals and to commit to updating us regularly on your progress. I'm not asking you for proprietary information like you put a cell tower here or there, but I would like to see a commitment to, I'd like to see you go back to the rest of your colleagues at Verizon, have that Wednesday discussion and focus on, okay, we can solve this problem substantially in 6 months, or we can solve it in a year, and we commit to checking in with you regularly to see those areas where we're not having service, that we will, commit to one at a time or two at a time. All of them at a time is fine as well, to really making progress towards that. I mean, I'm feeling we're getting this kind of, we're working to make things better, but those are not measurable goals that we can hold you to account for. And I know cell service is a utility. It's regulated, I think. Jim, you can answer this, by the BPU or maybe not, or regulated by, is it the
FCC?
FCC. So I feel like to some extent there's a little bit of fraud going on here. You're selling a service, but you're not actually providing that service. And as many people mentioned, they're paying a great deal of money and they're not getting anything. And as Carol Kelly, our superintendent, as Mia stressed, as a number of our speakers from the public stressed, like this is life and death. Like Governor's Lane is a complete desert of cell service, and we just are putting up hundreds more units right next door, adding to our problem of this desert. Somebody is going to have a heart attack and not going to be able to get in touch with EMS. And, that is just an untenable situation. Like, we're not out in the wilds where there's no infrastructure here. It's really, this is something that, and I think my colleagues can attest to this, I mean, I don't think a month goes by before somebody complains about this and how it's affecting their life, their livelihood, and potentially their safety. So I think we really need to hear more from you than, yes, someday in the future. I'd like a timetable, a schedule, and measurable goals that you, and I know you're getting the brunt of this and not AT&T or T-Mobile since they're not here in person, so I appreciate you standing in for them. But I think we really need to, we need to have those measurable goals, and we need to have you commit to, have things be better. And just, Jim, can I ask you real quick, can you throw up that slide which showed where the proposed Verizon 5G was, because I think that is just going to create a situation in which we once again, we have the haves and the have-nots. I mean, those locations, cover our central business district. They cover, areas where, a good portion of the town lives, but you can see that there are vast deserts where that's not being covered. And as we move more from 4G to 5G, and as people update their phone, this situation could get even worse. I'm concerned about that. So I just want you to take all of this back and really come up with a plan, for what you, Verizon, and I will say that this is what people say in Princeton about cell service, which is no matter how bad your cell service is with another carrier, Verizon is better. It's bad, but well, at least that's been my experience. It's bad, but it's better than the others. But this is not the standard, I think, that you want to. We are not as bad as AT&T is not like a slogan you want to run on. So, thank you.
Councilwoman, thank you for the feedback. We are aware, and we are looking at some additional opportunities to provide coverage outside of what is being shown on the screen. I cannot commit tonight to a time frame to get any of them online, but I do know that we have a number of projects that are in one phase or another of being ready to go, shovel in the ground. So we are continuing to work with our own team and with our partner to get some of these online. As we apply, we'll be closer to getting them online, and I do know that we have a variety of solutions that we're working to address to get some of these issues addressed. These concerns that have been raised this evening, addressed and some solutions. Yes, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Jennifer, for being here, for being in the hot seat. It gives you a competitive advantage to be here with your other providers that didn't show up. And I have to say, I am really hopeful to hear that you're working on the digital divide, but we need to work on the connectivity divide that we have in town. What I'd like to know is I know that these are proprietary information, but we've outlined tonight through the testimony of our residents a variety, quite a large variety of areas that are really dead zones. We want to make sure that your plans where you're upgrading are going to address these zones. This is really essential. How do we know that you're going to invest? I know this is major investment, but it gives you a competitive advantage if you move forward and others don't. And now we want to make sure that you're addressing those areas that we already know we're not getting service. There's some real bad situations, and I know of a few others that we didn't even mention tonight, but I think they're on the map.
So we did take notes, and we'll be taking that back to our teams. If they're not something that we were aware of, it'll at least give us some perspective so that we can look at some areas that we need to make sure that we are putting on the planning phase. And it is a major investment. It is a major financial investment to for each one of these projects, there's a lot of money involved, and for some of them, it is a multi-year planning, and so that's one of the reasons why I cannot commit, because it is a pretty large budget that we're working from.
Okay, I know we had a couple more members of the public that wanted to come up. So why don't we, if anyone from the public that wants to come up, ask a question or make a comment, why don't you come on up?
Sorry, I hope this doesn't sound like a really ridiculous
Could you just
question.
reintroduce yourself?
Oh, I'm still Lorna O'Sullivan. Lorna O'Sullivan. I just, aside from the frustration and definitely the safety is the main thing. I just keep thinking, why am I paying a bill and I'm not getting a service? Why can't they mark, oh, Princeton, dead zone, no bill? I mean, they have to be aware this has been going on and on and on. Why do I get a bill every month and yet I can't make phone calls? Don't they have discounts for living in dead zones? No, I mean, really, I'm buying a pig in a poke.
Hi, Rob Walzer, 229 Mount Lucas. Thank you for holding this tonight. So something I really think is important is that you all stay heavily involved in those maps that they're showing, because I have huge concerns considering when you show the signal map, a lot of those red and orange zones, including where I live just up the street here, are not in any way covered by any of these new maps of anything else coming up. So to your point before of haves and have-nots, it's very evident where the new towers are going up. So I think it's very important that you all stay heavily involved in where we're going to put these towers to make sure that it's equitable for everyone in town, no matter where they live. Thank you.
Mount Lucas and Ewing, that area?
Exactly.
I never can keep a call.
No.
Ever.
The front of my house to
Just
the
drops
walking
right
around, I lose it whichever direction I'm walking. Yeah,
Well, we're
it's-
putting it on the list.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Jim, could you just speak for just a second in response to that question about what role we play as a municipality and where towers get put?
Well, we're similar to Crown Castle. We're at the mercy of the providers and them coming to us and saying, we want to put a facility in X location, and then we facilitate that. If it falls under the new regulations, and most of them do, we process it through an administrative waiver of site plan. If they're working, for example, with Crown Castle on putting a Verizon antenna on a Crown Castle existing facility, we have 60 days to approve it. We have very little authority to reject it, and we really don't want to reject it. Our job is to make sure that the health, safety, and welfare of the public is served, and enhancing our cellular network is one way that we want to make sure we do that. So we work very closely with them to make sure that the location chosen doesn't interfere with our own projects, because that is something that happens every once in a while. They may decide that they want to place a small cell at a location where we're about to come in and perhaps rebuild Witherspoon Street. So we want to work with them and make sure that it's located where it won't interfere with our new facilities. The only other couple of ways that we can say no to a site is if it's going to interfere with with communications on another level, but they also have the ability to correct that before we can say no. Or if there is some other reason that it would be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And so far, I haven't come up with any reasons to say no to a new tower, not tower, I should say small cell. One of the problems here in Princeton is the geography. As many of you know, you live on the other side of the ridge. If there's a cell tower on one side of the ridge, you're not getting a signal on the other side of the ridge. So hopefully the providers will come to us with requests for more macro sites in addition to these small cell sites. The macro sites receive signals from the small cells and send them to satellites, and that's how we communicate. But the macro sites also act as receivers themselves directly from our own cell phones. So, we are working with the providers right now on several different sites, and as I mentioned, one of those sites is a 5G, and we've approved it. It's going to have a new 4G antenna on it. I'm looking forward to seeing the projects that Jennifer is talking about that I haven't seen yet, in terms of trying to fix some of these dead zones, particularly up along Cherry Valley Road, Ridgeview Road, and the western section, and over on Prospect and Riverside. So,
All of Littlebrook.
Okay.
And Littlebrook, yes.
All right. Why don't we get back to, the few more public comments, and then we're...
Okay, I find, by the way, your very, very clear discussion here, and it was nice and clear, very depressing. I am still Shari Ruskin, I am still on Westerly Road, and I am still a have-not, and will be a have-not, according to that map. And yes, I am paying a lot of money. I'm not the only person in this room, and I do understand, I'm sorry I'm getting agitated, but not with anybody here. I do understand it's a major capital investment, but the people sitting in this room make an investment in service, which we're not getting. And yes, a couple of you have asked for some specific plans, some specific timeline. We are getting zero specificity. I've heard all of the asking, and I've heard no response. What's depressing to me is it seems as if, as a township, there's no control over this process. And you guys are all willing to have something happen. There has to be something more, and I'm sorry, by the way, Verizon is not better in the western section. It's a great idea, but it's not true. My husband has AT&T, a friend of mine has T-Mobile. My husband can make a phone call in my backyard. I hate to tell him he's got better anything than I have. And I'll leave you on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ruth Miller, and I live at 34 Governors Lane. When the housing at Thanet was starting to be built, we all thought, oh, great, there's going to be another several hundred residents, and so there'll be an incentive for the cell phone companies, thinking about Verizon and Comcast, actually, were the ones that we thought about, to do something to improve the cell phone service. So the board of Governors Lane met at Thanet and met with some people from the cell phone companies. I do not know who they were, I'm not on the board. But they met with them and basically were told, oh, sorry, that's not really a large number of people who are going to be added to the area. So I am not sure that we're going to be able to do anything to improve the service. And we were just crushed by that. And I don't know how many people it takes, how many houses you have to build with people in them for the companies to react. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Hi, Peter Madison, 645 Snowden Lane. I have a suggestion to Jim and to the members of the council who are here. A few years ago, I procured a map of all the town-owned property, not Green Acres property, but other town-owned property. And there were quite a few small parcels spread throughout the town, parcels that probably have little or no commercial use because of the size. You also have a number of properties, parks, that are available. And my suggestion is that you look instead at working with the cell tower companies. One of them mentioned that they have trouble finding properties to put the towers on. Well, I think you have properties that could be potential sites for cell towers. So you make available some of these small properties, or for example, Smoyer Park has a storage building, which is kind of ugly, so put a tower by the storage building. So look at these potential opportunities to lease out municipal property to the cell companies, which then produces income from the leases and helps the cell towers with facilitating locations for them to put cell towers. And everybody wins then. You get income from these properties, and we get cell towers. And so I would suggest, if you might, think that that might be a potential solution to the problem, or at least partial solution. Thank you, and thank you for allowing us to vent tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, it's Jeff Bergman again, 300 Dodds Lane. First, I want to apologize to Crown Castle, because I think I may have disparaged them. I didn't realize that they were just an infrastructure provider. Although it really seems like we need an Anderson Windows and Doors person, because one person is blaming another, and we're not getting anything done. A number of years ago, under a former mayor, we had a wish day where we came in and we said, these are the things that we wished for. And one of the things that I remember, I think I suggested, was that the town provides internet service to members of the town. And part of that was because the service that we get from people like Verizon is abysmal. And I think that we could do it better and cheaper. I spend between wireless and cable over $400 a month, which goes to Verizon, which is a ton of money. And I'm getting terrible service, and there's no customer service when you want to complain. So I still think it's a great idea if we could piggyback on that last idea, like use our own properties and provide Wi-Fi service to the town, and maybe put a little pressure on the other service providers like Verizon and AT&T, and you can work with Crown Castle and get our own wireless networks. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight, Verizon, Crown Castle, and I will say that our engineering department has been talking to Verizon quite a bit, and I think tonight, even though we don't have specific answers, the tone of the conversation and being quite open and honest with the frustrations, I think will help us when we have our engineering department talk to Verizon engineering people, the engineers for their network. I think that's going to help us quite a bit trying to push a number of solutions along. So anyway, I don't know if there's any other council comments or questions that we haven't already beaten to death, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I don't know, Jim, if you can answer, Bernie, is there, I think the point about we're paying for service and we're not receiving service, is there a state ombuds person or someone at the state level that we could communicate with about this? Because, part of tonight was documenting the frustration that I feel like we have been communicating for quite a few years now. I hope that there will be a response. I'm skeptical, given that I feel like we have been venting these concerns for a while, and I'm wondering, what is the next level in terms of documenting the fact that there's a significant amount of money being paid in Princeton for service that is not being received on a massive scale?
I think you asked me that question, and I really don't have an answer. So, sorry.
Well, we heard
That's
that-
an unusual thing for me.
We heard the FCC is the regulating body, so there's probably not someone at the state level.
Yes,
Yeah, I think we should reach out to our, federal representatives. Should contact Bonnie Watson Coleman and our senators and,
I
ask
think
for some action.
Ask for our constituents in the audience to back us up in reaching out to our legislative representatives. We would appreciate that. We will as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously an option, and I think one of our first steps should be in the very near future, probably after the holiday, is have our engineering department talk to the Verizon. Sorry to pick on you guys, but you're here. AT&T isn't. Although I do have an email into the president of AT&T New Jersey suggesting we have a meeting very soon. We'll see what happens with that. But I think our engineering department should talk to Verizon network engineers again. I mean, we had a call not that long ago. We've had a number of calls, and so hopefully this will help speed up that whole process. And I know your networking engineering department does have a number of proposed solutions that would address a number of the concerns brought up tonight. But we really do need to push for what are some specific deadlines and when is some of this going to happen. Part of the problem is just kind of funny, communication, and we're dealing with communication companies. But if we could actually provide people with, here's what we're going to do and here's when we hope to do it by, I think that would be helpful. Everybody realizes not everything's going to get fixed tomorrow, but having some kind of realistic dialogue on when things might happen would be very helpful. Anyway, anything else we need to? Okay, again, thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, everyone from the public. And David?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Eve. All in favor, say aye.
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 We're done. Thank you.